Our other speaker is Professor Bill Niven. Give us a wave. Bill is a Professor for Contemporary German History at Nottingham Trent University. He's written widely on Germany's attempts to come to terms with its Nazi and GDR past, and more recently on European memory of the Holocaust. Bill has also been researching memory of the Kindertransport, particularly in Germany. It's been really lovely to publish a few articles together on this. Bill's also published many, many books. I'm just going to mention a few here. One is Facing the Nazi Past, The Booking World Child, Representations of Flight and Expulsion, Hitler in Film, The Führer's Secret Past.
Okay, is that all right now? Can everybody hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks very much for the introduction, Amy, and thanks very much to Hanna for that really fascinating account, and also Andy for your work with the school. It's really, really important. I was just going to talk a little bit about Germany, and Hanna also touched on this, and the way that Germany's tried to face up to its past over the particularly last 10 or 20 years. And I was just thinking particularly of Berlin's Holocaust Memorial, which was dedicated in 2005. And it's probably the most visited memorial in the world. It's become a tourist destination, which has its positive and its negative sides, but there's no doubt that it's an important site of memory for Germans and internationally. And it's just a few yards away from Berlin's parliament, which just goes to show how important it is and how central it is for German memory. There are also a lot of memorials to synagogues and Kristallnacht in Germany. But what I found was a bit missing was memory of exile until more recently. There is the Jewish Museum in Berlin. I don't know if you know that, which was opened in 2001, which has a garden of exile outside the main building, and it connects the Holocaust and Jewish exile and immigration. But perhaps the most obvious connection, particularly between the Kindertransport and the Holocaust in Germany, is the Frank Meisler Memorial in Berlin, which you may or may not have seen at Friedrichstrasse. And it shows two groups of children, one group heading obviously on the Kindertransport, and the other group of children heading to an uncertain destination, but it's probably Auschwitz. And it's called Trains to Life and Trains to Death. And if you contrast it with the Frank Meisler Memorial in London, there's one at Liverpool Street where you see a group of arriving children. You can see the difference between the way the Germans remember and the way the British remember. That we remember arrival in Britain, we remember the kids getting here to safety and how we then integrated them into our society. And the Germans remember the departure of the children to Britain and other countries too, but they also can't forget the children that didn't manage to leave, the 1.5 million that were then murdered in the Holocaust. And I think that's a particularly central part of German memory, the connection between remembering the Kindertransport and remembering the Holocaust. And it's also come through very much through Hanna's story. There's a similar memorial in Hamburg, which also shows the two groups of children. So remembering the Kindertransport means in Germany, it also means remembering it's a form of forced removal. That parents sent their children to safety with a heavy heart, though, and under duress. And for the children, the separation was very painful because many never saw their parents or their families again. I don't know if you know her book, but in her book, The Uprooted, Dorrit Whiteman tells how when she set out to write a study of those who escaped the Nazis before the final solution, she originally wanted to call it What Happened to Those to Whom Nothing Happened at All. And this was the way she wrote that many former refugees and many children on the Kindertransport saw themselves. Seeing their own fate in relation to all those murdered in the Holocaust, they considered how lucky they'd been. Yet, as Whiteman's book also shows, many refugees, especially children, suffered in exile from hostility, loneliness, prejudice, and above all from loss. And the price they paid for safety was a very heavy one, I think. And I think just to mention the final memorial, the Kindertransport needs to be remembered as part of the whole process of Nazi discrimination in Germany and the uprooting of Jews. And this is very much clear from Günter Demnick's Stumbling Stones project. I don't know if you know this one, but in Germany, in fact, many European countries now, an artist called Günter Demnick has set stumbling stones into the pavements at the last place of residence, last voluntary place of residence or voluntary place of work of Jews and other victims of Nazism before they either committed suicide forced into emigration or were deported and killed. And some of these stumbling stones are in name or in memory of Kindertransportees. So I know I'm going to ask Hanna about this in a moment. So quite a few stumbling stones commemorate former Kinder, but they also commemorate their families. And it's striking when you look at some of these stones that you don't just read about a child who managed to get away on the Kindertransport, you also read about what happened to the other members of their families. And I was struck by one, a family called Lifkens in Bamberg. And there are 5 stones. One of them says that one member got away on the Kindertransport, I think Hildegard she was called, in 1939. The other 4 stones tell you that everyone else was murdered in Izbica, near Lublin in Poland, during the Holocaust. And so this connection between escape on the one hand and murder, the Holocaust on the other, is very, very close in German memory. Also, I think, and this connects, I think, to Amy's research. I mean, Amy's been researching the transnational journeys of the Kindertransport, and several of these memorials in Germany don't just say, you know, so-and-so went on a Kindertransport in 1938. There's one stone, I can't remember who it commemorates now, but it indicates that a child went to Britain and then went to Australia and then went to Shanghai. And one of these many, Hannah's herself done one of these huge international journeys. And this particular kind, it doesn't say so on the stumbling stone, but I presume that this kind was an internee, that was interned in Britain when the war began, or shortly after the war began, when Jews, German Jews and Austrian Jews became enemy aliens, some of them anyway, and then deported to Australia and interned there when the British camps got too full, and then ended up in Shanghai. So these wider international journeys are clear from some of these stones as well. And I'll come back just at the end to ask Hanna about your work with stumbling. So perhaps I can interrupt that and see why I can't just do that now. I was looking at your work in Gmünd with an organisation there that's been a stumbling stones working group, I think it would be called in England, in British English, which has been working to place memorials around Gmünd to both Jewish and non-Jewish victims of the Nazis. And I think you've been very active in supporting this group. And I also read that you give talks relatively regularly at Stumbling Stones inaugurations, not just in Gmünd, but elsewhere. And I was going to ask you, well, why you do this and why you feel it's important to support this project. I think you also are connected with one of the families of the Kaufmann family. I can't remember who are recalled in Germany. But anyway, I just wanted to ask you about the stumbling stones and what you feel about them.
Yeah, it's a middle. You know, this is a very significant project. This, Stolpersteins, stumbling stones, because like they're all over Germany and Europe and beyond, and it's just one man, Gunter Demning, who does it. Well, I kind of stumbled on it. In Gmünd, like many places, some people are rather uncomfortable about doing this, because some people find it, they don't want to face, they're very obvious there in the street. They're like these brass bricks, and it's in front of the building where the Jewish families, individuals lived. And in Gmünd, what it took was one person who was very passionate about it. He was actually a Catholic theologian. His name was Georg Toporowski, and we came to know him, and I felt that our role was to encourage him, because it was a long, several years process, and he was a person who could bring the working group together. So every time we were in Germany, we would attend these working group meetings. And often the particular village or town that wants to remember the Jews, they invite Gunter Demnig to do this, and they request money from businesses to cover the expenses. For me, it was an amazing process to have this in Gimund and to be present when my parents' stones were laid. And even more, not more, but equally poignant for me was the Stolperstein laid for my best friend, Kurt Meyer. Just a couple of doors away. And I think one of the reasons that I want to attend those events is because these people are remembered as people. You know, their names are there for everyone to see. They were real people. They were individuals. They had a life. And it amazes me how this Gunter Demnig and the community that has the stones is ready to acknowledge what happened, because there's the person's name, their date of birth, and then when the date of their murder. So, you know, that is a public confession. And it's an amazing thing to be present. And if I am invited, I like to say a word of encouragement for this, for what they're doing, because I think the memorials has a significance beyond the lifetime of the people involved in it.
Thanks very much. That was one thing that I wanted to know, because you'd obviously been very, very active about in the Stumbling Stones initiative. I don't know if there's somebody called Peter Jordan. I don't know if you know him, who was also very much another British Kindertransport. He was very active in the Stumbling Stones in Munich, and he had Stumbling Stones dedicated there to his parents who were killed in the Holocaust. And then Munich took them down, because in Munich you're not allowed to place stones. There are one or two German cities that don't really like those stones. So that's just why I see it the same way you do, but I think some people have problems because you actually might tread on the stones, and that's regarded as a problem. But I agree with you. I like them very much. I think maybe just finally, we might want to mention one or two exhibitions we've been to in Germany. There have been quite a few new exhibitions. I mean, I think the interest in the Kindertransport is very recent in Germany. I wanted to ask you about that again right at the end, but Amy and I have been following one or two exhibitions. There was one in Augsburg, for instance, about child refugees in 2015, which looked at both the Kindertransport children and children, unaccompanied minors, who've come to Germany over the last few years, particularly to Augsburg, and it connected the fates of these refugees, these more recent refugees, with the Kindertransport. And we ourselves, so Amy and myself, Andrea Hamel of Aberystwyth University, and a group called Fotowerk Berlin, we created an exhibition in Berlin on the Kindertransport, where we tried to look at it from both the German and the British point of view, to try to connect the two histories, certainly, of Germany and Britain, because it's a history of it's a German history and it's British history, but too often I think it's seen apart rather than connected. And we created an exhibition which was shown in Berlin last year. And I suppose I just wanted to ask you about, you talk about the importance of conciliation and the importance of reconciliation particularly, and that's very important to you. Do you think that reconciliation has now been achieved for many people such as yourself, or is it still a work in progress? Or I just wanted to know how you felt generally about it. And the significance of the German government's gesture of compensation, for instance, recently, was that just symbolic, or do you see a deeper significance in it?
Reconciliation, there is the aspect when both parties come together, and the one who has been wronged forgives. And then there is the other party who did the wrong, or is descendant of the wrongdoers, acknowledging that it was a bad thing. And I think that's the best kind of reconciliation,
Yeah.
because you can really join hearts and become united. I think that is not always possible, because there is a mixture of people in every country, and there are such a variety of Germans. There are the ones who are free to really look at the past. There are people who have dealt with their own family wrongs. And so I think, for me personally, my role is to forgive. And when there is acknowledgement of wrong, that is a beautiful thing. And I am so blessed with that. But, I have met people in the denial camp and everything. And I have to take care not to rejoin with my own antagonism and hatred. I must be true to this higher standard of forgiveness.
Yes.
So I think about Steinmeier, who the president, who said, we can only love our country with broken hearts. And I think that doesn't apply just to Germany. I think it applies to America. I think it applies to Britain. How, if we're honest about our history worldwide, we have really stuff that is very dark.
Well, thanks very much for that. And I suppose from my point of view, one other question about learning from the Kindertransport, because I think behind some of these exhibitions is the idea that we could learn, for the present, to help us respond better to humanitarian crises. And there've been one or two other sort of actions around memorials trying to point out that it's important not just to remember the Kindertransport, but also to be aware of what's happening today and try to draw lessons from the past. Is that something that's very close to your heart as well? And do you think it can be done successfully?
That question is actually the lead-in to what my final word was. So, I don't know, Amy, should I read what I wrote for that, or is that okay?
Fine for me.
I was an unaccompanied child refugee, and my hope is that my story will evoke compassionate care for children who are experiencing loss and trauma today. How many years will it take for each child to find healing from the scars of their losses? My story is also a warning at this time when far-right beliefs and contempt for the other is spreading like a virus.
Thank you, Hannah, for your closing words. Really, really appreciate you speaking with us all today and sharing your experiences. I just want to thank all the speakers, to Hannah, to Bill, to Andy. It's been such a remarkable experience for everybody. I mean, I've just been responding to some of the questions on the chat and the conversations that are going on there. It's wonderful. What an experience, I mean, it's really sad that we can't be together at the moment. And I think all these events that are online to bring people together and to form these connections and to listen to stories is just wonderful.